In the middle of a freezing blizzard, a Navy SEAL was on duty trying to find his way back when he spotted a dog locked inside a steel cage in the middle of a snow-covered field. He opened that cage with one simple thought in mind: save a life struggling against the brutal cold. But the dog didn't just need rescuing. She was trying to lead him to something someone else wanted hidden. An unusually empty cabin. A grave raised far too quickly. Official papers declaring 2 people dead, while every surrounding detail told a different story. In a small town where people believe what they are shown and told, no one realized that someone had quietly arranged everything behind the scenes. From that moment on, the soldier and the dog were no longer just searching for answers. They were fighting to restore justice for those who had been erased. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from.
I can't believe this is happening.
After the story, share your thoughts.
What does this mean
and
for the
please
town?
like and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers so we can continue bringing you more powerful stories. The storm had moved on the way storms sometimes did in the far north, without apology, leaving behind a world scrubbed clean and shining too brightly to trust. Sunlight lay across the snow like spilled glass. The forest stood in rigid silence, every spruce branch stitched with white, every shadow sharp enough to cut. Even the air felt sharpened, clean, yes, but so cold it seemed to press a hand against the lungs and remind them who was in charge. Logan Pierce walked alone. He was 37 and the kind of man whose posture looked trained into him so long ago it had become his resting shape. Tall, around 6'3", lean and hard without bulk, built for endurance rather than display. His face was clean-shaven, jaw squared and exposed, cheekbones defined beneath wind-weathered skin that was pale but roughened by northern cold. Dark brown hair sat in a military cut, neat but slightly longer than regulation, as if he'd loosened one rule in a life built from rules. His eyes, gray-blue, stayed awake even when the rest of him wanted to pretend this was just another day. His clothing matched him, old, functional, honest about its wear. A worn olive/army gray tactical combat shirt, softened by years and frayed at cuffs and shoulders, faded in places where weather and washing had done their work. Earth brown/moss green combat pants with scuffed knees and slightly sagging cargo pockets. Old military work boots. An old military watch that did not gleam, did not brag. It simply kept time. He had been on a winter navigation test for his unit, part of a training rotation that treated the cold like a teacher and the wilderness like a courtroom. But the storm had thrown its own verdict. The GPS had pulsed, then stuttered, then gone blind. The trail markers had disappeared under fresh snow. The world had become a blank page. Logan wasn't afraid of blank pages. He was afraid of missing what mattered on them. That fear didn't look like panic. It looked like focus. He listened. The forest offered nothing at first. No birds, no wind in the high branches, just the hush of a place that had learned survival by being quiet. Then he heard it. Not a bark, not a howl. A thin, metallic vibration, like someone plucking a wire with a cold finger. He turned slow and careful and followed the sound into a small clearing where the sunlight pooled like a spotlight. And there it was, a steel cage. It sat half buried on packed snow, crude in its construction and wrong in its presence, as if it had been dropped from some other world and forgotten. The metal bars wore a skin of frost. Coils of twisted wire, stiff and thorned, wrapped the frame like a crown of bad decisions. The cage looked old, but not abandoned. Not the kind of old that belongs to nature, the kind of old that belongs to people. Logan approached with the measured stillness of a man who had learned that rushing was how you got hurt. Inside the cage stood a German, shepherd, female about 6 years old, black and tan coat dulled by snow and grime, dark saddle across her back like a shadow that refused to leave. She was sturdy by breed, but her ribs hinted through her fur in the way winter writes its own arithmetic. Her ears were upright, trembling slightly, not from weakness alone, but from alertness held too long. Her amber dark eyes fixed on Logan without pleading. No noise, no begging, just that look, sharp, evaluating, as if she was deciding whether he was rescue or repetition. Logan stopped an arm's length away, his breath made small ghosts in the air. "Easy," he said, voice low, not soft with sweetness, steady with control. The dog did not move closer, she did not step back, she simply watched. Logan's gaze went to the cage door, no padlock, no obvious latch. For a moment, the simplest question rose in his mind, blunt as a rock. If there's no lock, why are you still in there? His fingers traced the edge of the door without committing. He found it then, a bent metal tongue, a hidden sliding catch jammed beneath a layer of ice and warped steel. Not a lock you could see from a distance. Not a lock meant to be found by anyone passing by. A lock meant to keep a creature honest with fear. He crouched, boots creaking on the snow, and worked the catch with a compact tool from his belt. The metal resisted, squealing once, a thin scream quickly swallowed by the cold. The dog flinched at the sound but didn't lunge, didn't bark, just inhaled sharply as if the noise had touched an old nerve. Logan steadied his hand, slowed his movements. The catch gave. The door shuddered open. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The German shepherd stood perfectly still, muscles coiled in a careful question. Is this real? Logan held position and did what he'd learned to do with anything that could decide to fight. He gave it room to choose. She stepped forward, one paw, then another. Her gait was controlled, but he saw it. The faint favoring of one front leg, a cautious shift of weight, a healed wrongness. She cleared the threshold, then did something strange. She walked 3 steps into the sunlight. Exactly 3. Then she sat, not collapsing, sitting, head high, shoulders squared, facing not Logan but the tree line beyond him, as if the forest itself was the thing she'd been waiting to confront. Logan didn't move for a second. The cold pressed against his cheeks. The sun glared off the snow, and somewhere in him, a thought rose like a reluctant prayer. You didn't survive this by accident. The dog's ears rotated, sharp and sudden, not toward Logan, toward the sky. A faint sound drifted through the stillness, too brief to be wind, too shaped to be random. A thin note, like a whistle that had been swallowed mid-breath. Logan froze. The German shepherd's posture changed in a way Logan knew intimately, the way a trained body snaps from rest into readiness without drama. Her spine stiffened, her head tilted a fraction as if measuring distance, her eyes narrowed not with fear but with recognition. Logan scanned the clearing. Nothing moved. No footsteps, no engine. No shadow sliding between trees, just sunlight, snow, and the quiet arrogance of calm. But the dog remained locked on that direction, as if calm was only a costume. Logan's pulse didn't spike. It settled into a colder rhythm. The dog wasn't reacting to what was there. She was reacting to what had been there, to a pattern, and patterns were rarely innocent. He reached slowly into his pack and pulled out a folded thermal blanket. He kept his movements deliberate, telegraphed. He draped it near her rather than over her, letting her decide whether to accept it. For the first time, she looked back at him, not grateful, not afraid, present. She leaned forward, sniffed the blanket, then stepped onto it with one paw, claiming it like a territory of warmth she'd earned. Logan released a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He checked the inside of the cage, a metal bowl thrown to the floor, scrape marks where claws had dug at ice, a groove in the dirt where something had rubbed, where a body had paced, waited, refused to lie down. Logan's jaw tightened. He had seen cages before, not like this. This wasn't a cage built to transport. This was a cage built to delay time until time did the killing. He straightened and glanced over his shoulder, back toward the ridgeline that was supposed to be his route. The sun made everything look honest. The world was not honest. The German shepherd rose from the blanket and moved closer to him. Not touching, not begging, just close enough that Logan could feel her warmth in the thin air between them. A partner's distance. He looked at her again, really looked. The black mask along her muzzle, the snow clinging to fur at her neck, the small old scar along the right front leg that caught the light when she shifted. "Freya," he said, testing the name in his mind before he spoke it aloud. It came to him uninvited, like something pulled from the edge of memory. A name that felt steady, ancient, stubborn. The dog's ears twitched. She didn't react like she recognized it. She reacted like she didn't mind it. Logan took that as permission. He scanned the clearing once more, then turned back to the cage. He wanted to understand it. Not because curiosity was a hobby, but because understanding was how you stayed alive. He stepped closer, his gloved hand slid along the frost-bitten metal frame. And there, beneath the ice, half hidden, his fingertips found a shallow engraving. A mark, not accidental, not rust. A deliberate cut into steel. Logan's hand stopped. His eyes narrowed, gray-blue becoming something harder. He didn't say what he saw. He didn't even fully process it in the open air. Instead, he did what he'd learned to do when something mattered more than the moment allowed. He kept it inside. Freya looked toward the trees again, then back to Logan as if checking whether he understood the rules of this strange new game. Logan swallowed. Not from fear, from weight. He had come into the woods to test his navigation. But the woods had offered him a different test. A life in a cage. A mark on steel, a dog who listened to silence like it could speak. Logan lifted his pack, adjusted the straps, and nodded once, not to the dog, not to himself, but to whatever thread of fate had tied them together in this clearing. Freya stepped forward, close to his left side, her gait careful but determined. Together they left the cage behind in the blinding sunlight. And the forest, unchanged on the outside, seemed to tighten around them, quietly as if it had been waiting for someone to finally notice. The forest thinned as Logan and Freya moved downslope, leaving the clearing behind without looking back. The snow underfoot was no longer wind-scoured and untouched. Here, the surface held faint depressions, old, half-softened by drift and sun, not enough to call them tracks, just enough to feel like memory. Freya did not rush. She moved with deliberate economy, favoring her right front leg only slightly, as if she had decided pain was a negotiation rather than a command. She kept to Logan's left side most of the time, not brushing against him, not demanding proximity, just maintaining a distance that felt chosen. Logan adjusted the strap of his pack and let her set the pace. He had learned long ago that the fastest way to miss something was to assume you already understood it. The air smelled faintly different now, not the clean, high scent of open ridge, but something warmer beneath the frost, wood smoke long gone cold, old pine sap, the faint mineral breath of human, living. Freya's ears flicked. She angled right, away from the most direct descent path. Logan followed. They came over a shallow rise and saw it at the same moment, a small cabin nestled between spruce trunks. Its roof bowed slightly under the weight of last night's storm. The structure looked sturdy, hand-built decades ago. Cedar planks darkened by age, windows small but square, a narrow porch swept mostly clean of snow. Too clean for a place that had just endured a blizzard. Logan stopped. Freya did not. She walked forward slowly, nose low, tail neither tucked nor raised, balanced. The front door stood closed, not broken, not hanging. Closed. Logan approached with a quiet knock of knuckles against wood. No answer. He tested the handle. Unlocked. The door opened inward without resistance. Warmth did not greet them. The air inside was still. Not abandoned, stale, just paused. Logan stepped in first. The cabin interior held the shape of a life lived carefully. A woven rug near the hearth, a narrow bookshelf lined with paperbacks and 2 thick binders, a small dining table with 2 chairs placed opposite each other, not side by side, a cast-iron kettle resting centered on the stove as if someone had adjusted it before leaving. Everything was orderly, but not in the way of tidiness, in the way of correction. Logan moved toward the table and ran his fingers lightly across the surface. No dust, no crumbs. He opened a drawer. Utensils aligned precisely, each piece touching the next in exact symmetry. His jaw tightened slightly. "People don't leave like this," he murmured. Freya circled the room once, her nails ticking softly against the wooden floorboards. She paused near the fireplace, sniffed the ashtray, then moved on. She did not lie down. She did not relax. She was not searching randomly. She was scanning. Logan crouched near the hearth and examined the ash. The fire had burned recently, but not within the last day. The ash pattern suggested it had been stirred and flattened afterward. He stood and walked toward a narrow hallway. The bedroom door was open. Inside, the bed was made. Blankets smoothed flat, pillows centered. On the nightstand sat a framed photograph. An elderly couple stood in front of this same cabin. The man was tall for his age, perhaps in his late 70s. Shoulders stooped slightly, but still broad. His face bore deep-set lines carved by sun and wind rather than bitterness. A trimmed white beard framed his jaw, not unruly but practical. His eyes in the photograph were pale blue and steady, the kind of eyes that met storms without complaint. Beside him stood a woman slightly shorter, silver hair pulled into a low bun, posture upright with stubborn dignity. Her features were delicate but strong, skin fine and lightly freckled. She wore a knitted cardigan and held something just out of frame. Logan recognized it instantly. A leash. Freya stepped into the bedroom. She froze when she saw the photograph. Her ears lowered, not flat, not submissive, just lowered. She walked closer, sat. Logan watched her closely. "You know this place," he said quietly. Freya did not look at him. She kept her eyes on the photograph, not pleading, remembering. Logan's chest tightened, not from sentimentality, but from recognition of something deeper. This wasn't random. He moved to the closet. Inside, coats hung evenly spaced, boots placed side by side, toes aligned, 2 aligned. Logan had served with men who folded socks with military precision. This wasn't precision. This was staging. He returned to the kitchen. Freya had moved again. She stood now in front of a lower cabinet. She did not scratch at it. She did not bark. She simply stood there, staring at the wood panel as if willing it to answer. Logan hesitated. Then he opened the cabinet. Canned goods arranged neatly. A tin of coffee at the back. He reached, passed it, and felt something thin. Paper. He pulled out a small folded scrap, no envelope, no name. Just one sentence written in firm, steady handwriting. "If they come polite, don't believe them." Logan read it twice. The handwriting did not tremble. This wasn't written in panic. It was written in preparation. He felt a flicker of something he rarely allowed himself. Respect. Freya turned her head toward the window. Her body stiffened, not in alarm, but in attention. Logan followed her gaze. The clearing outside remained still. Sunlight, snow, nothing moving. And yet Freya's breathing shifted, shallow but controlled. Logan crossed to the door and stepped back outside. The air felt sharper now. He circled the perimeter of the cabin slowly. Around the back, near a small woodpile, he found it. A faint indentation in the snow. One set of boot impressions. Half filled. Not fresh from today, but recent enough to matter. The pattern on the sole was distinct. A central star-like shape broken on one edge. Logan crouched, studied the angle of entry and exit. The prints approached from the tree line. They left in the same direction. He stood and turned toward the woods. Freya had followed him. She did not approach the tracks directly. Instead, she moved 10 feet to the side and sniffed at the snow near a narrow pine sapling. Logan watched her behavior carefully. She was triangulating, not chasing. She lowered her head, then lifted it slightly, drawing scent upward rather than along the ground. She shifted 2 steps, paused, then sat. Not random, deliberate. Logan stepped toward the sapling and brushed snow away with his glove. There was no object buried there, no box, no hidden tool, just bark. But on the bark, faint and nearly invisible beneath a skim of frost, was a vertical scrape. Fresh wood exposed in a narrow line. Not claw marks, knife marks. Logan's pulse did not jump. It slowed. Someone had stood here, facing the cabin, carved something, not a symbol, not a word, just a mark, a line. Freya stared at it as if the line were speaking, and in that moment Logan understood something that did not need explanation. This was not about theft. This was about rehearsal. He felt the weight of the cabin behind him, the photograph on the nightstand, the careful placement of every object, the warning hidden behind coffee tins. Someone had come here politely, and someone had left deliberately. He straightened slowly. Freya remained seated, eyes on the scrape in the bark. Logan stepped back toward the house, scanning for any additional signs. He noticed then that the porch snow had been swept not evenly but in 2 distinct directions, as if 2 different people had used the same broom. One pattern shallow, one heavier, different heights, different rhythm. Inside, he moved back to the bookshelf. 2 binders sat among paperbacks. He pulled the first one free, property records, land deeds. The second binder held something else, not paperwork, photographs, each image taken from a distance, vehicles parked near the cabin, unfamiliar faces in winter coats. A dark SUV stopped at the edge of the tree line weeks ago. Logan flipped through them slowly. The elderly man in the photograph on the nightstand had not been passive. He had been documenting. Freya stepped closer, nose brushing the bottom edge of the binder. She did not sniff randomly. She stopped on one particular photograph. Logan looked down. The image showed a man in profile. Tall, clean coat, gloved hands, posture upright and composed. His face was partly obscured, but the line of his jaw and the way he stood suggested control rather than curiosity. Logan's eyes narrowed. He closed the binder. The cabin felt smaller now, not because of danger present, but because of intention. He returned the binders to the shelf exactly as he had found them. Freya watched him, not judging, assessing. Logan walked back into the bedroom and took the photograph from the nightstand. He studied the elderly couple again. "You saw it coming," he murmured. He replaced the frame gently. No rage, no dramatic vows, just calculation. He stepped back outside. The sunlight was beginning to shift. Freya moved to his left side again, that chosen distance. Logan looked once more at the cabin. The door still open, the snow still bright, the forest still pretending innocence. He closed the door carefully behind them, not locking it, just closing it. Then he looked down at Freya. "All right," he said quietly. Her ears twitched. He did not yet know what they were walking into, but he knew this much. The cage had not been the beginning. It had been the pause, and the cabin. The cabin had been the warning, They turned toward the tree line together. The forest did not move, but it did not look empty anymore. The road into Pine Hollow was a narrow ribbon of plowed ice, cutting through white fields and skeletal trees that looked like charcoal sketches against the sky. Logan drove the old forestry access truck he had borrowed from the training outpost, hands steady on the wheel. Freya lay in the passenger footwell at first, not asleep, but conserving energy. Every few minutes her head would rise, ears tilting, nose testing the air through the slight crack in the window. The town appeared gradually, not all at once, first a faded sign, then a gas pump under a metal awning, then a general store with hand-painted lettering that had seen better decades. Pine Hollow was not dying. It was surviving. The buildings were modest but maintained, snow shoveled, windows intact, porch lights functional. The kind of town that refused to surrender quietly, even if it had little left to defend. Logan parked outside the general store. Freya rose slowly and stepped out with him. The cold bit sharper, here on the open road less protected by forest cover. Inside, the bell above the door chimed. The store smelled of coffee, motor oil, and pine cleaner. Behind the counter stood a woman in her early 60s, tall and lean with steel gray hair cut blunt at her shoulders. Her name tag read Marjorie Hale. Her posture was upright, shoulders squared in a way that suggested she had once stood behind a different kind of counter. Perhaps a nurse's station, perhaps a classroom desk. Her eyes were light hazel, sharp but not unkind. Marjorie studied Logan first, then Freya. She did not flinch at the sight of the dog. "Cold day to be wandering," she said, voice calm but observant. "Training exercise went sideways," Logan replied evenly. Marjorie nodded once. She poured coffee without asking if he wanted any. "You're not local." It wasn't a question. No. Her gaze dropped to Freya's coat. The dog stood close to Logan's left side, alert but composed, tail neutral. "That dog is." Logan's eyes flicked back to hers. Marjorie didn't elaborate. Instead, she leaned slightly forward on the counter. "You find something out there you shouldn't have?" The question hung between them, neither accusation nor warning, just recognition. Logan did not answer directly. "I found a cabin." Marjorie's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "On the North Ridge?" she asked. "Yes." Her hands stilled on the counter. "That was Harold and Lillian Everett's place," she said quietly. Logan waited. Marjorie continued. "Harold was stubborn in the way only men who build their own homes get to be. Tall, even in his late 70s, wore his beard trimmed like he still had inspections to pass. Lillian was the steadier one, soft-spoken but sharper than most people gave her credit for. They'd been here 40 years. "And now?" Logan asked. Marjorie's eyes shifted briefly toward the window. "Now they're gone." Freya's ears twitched. Marjorie noticed. "You found her, didn't you?" she asked, eyes dropping to the dog. Logan gave a slight nod. Marjorie exhaled slowly. "Freya," she said, almost to herself. The dog's head turned at the sound of her name, not with surprise but with a subtle recognition that felt deeper than habit. Marjorie's lips pressed thin. "Lillian used to bring her in here every Thursday, wouldn't let anyone else near the leash. Said the dog listened better than most men." There was no smile when she said it. "What happened to them?" Logan asked. Marjorie wiped the counter with a cloth that did not need wiping. 2 months ago they started talking about selling the property," she said. "Not because they wanted to, because someone kept offering." "Who?" Marjorie hesitated. Before she could answer, the door chimed again. A man entered, brushing snow from the shoulders of his dark wool coat. He was tall, around 6'2", with neatly combed black hair and a clean-shaven face that looked carved rather than grown. His features were symmetrical in a way that felt rehearsed. His eyes were dark brown, calculating without appearing hostile. His movements were smooth, measured. He carried himself like someone used to being listened to. "Afternoon, Marjorie," he said warmly. His voice had practiced ease. Marjorie straightened slightly. "Mr. Hargrove." The man's gaze drifted to Logan, then to Freya. A flicker of something crossed his expression. Interest, quickly masked. "Didn't expect to see new faces," he said. Logan extended a hand. "Logan Pierce." "Calvin Hargrove," the man replied, grip firm but not crushing. "I consult on land acquisitions in this area, trying to keep Pine Hollow alive." The phrasing was deliberate. Freya stepped half a pace forward, not aggressive, not submissive, just closer. Her eyes fixed on Calvin's boots, polished, leather, not suited for deep snow. Calvin glanced down briefly at the dog. "Beautiful animal," he said lightly. "They can be protective. They can be honest," Logan replied. A silence passed that Marjorie pretended not to notice. Calvin smiled, wide enough to show teeth, not wide enough to show truth. "I hear Harold and Lillian had been considering relocation," he said. "Hard winters for people their age." "Did they relocate?" Logan asked calmly. Calvin's smile didn't falter. "I believe so." "Where?" "Somewhere warmer, I assume." Marjorie's cloth paused mid-wipe. Freya shifted her weight. Calvin's eyes flicked toward her again. "And you found her wandering?" Calvin asked. "In the woods," Logan said. Calvin tilted his head slightly. "That's unfortunate." He did not ask where. He did not ask how. Freya suddenly lowered her head and inhaled deeply near Calvin's coat hem, not sniffing like curiosity, testing. Her ears flattened, not in fear but in refusal. She took one slow step backward and positioned herself between Logan and Calvin. Her body did not tremble. It set. Calvin's smile tightened a fraction. "You should keep her leashed," he said mildly. Logan's gray-blue eyes held his. "She knows when she needs one." The room felt smaller, not dangerous, just clarified. Calvin's gaze lingered a moment longer on Logan's face, studying him not as a stranger but as an obstacle. Then he stepped back. "Well," he said smoothly, adjusting his cuffs. "If you're staying in town, perhaps we'll speak again. Pine Hollow rewards cooperation." He left with the same measured pace he had entered. The bell chimed. The door closed. Marjorie waited until his truck engine faded. Then she leaned closer across the counter. "He's been offering to buy half this town," she said quietly. "Cash, quick." "And the Everetts?" Logan asked. "They refused at first." "And later?" Marjorie swallowed. "Later they said they were considering it. A week after that, they stopped coming in." Freya relaxed slightly but did not lie down. Logan finished his coffee. "Anyone else approached?" he asked. "Almost everyone," Marjorie said. "But some of us aren't interested." Logan nodded once. Outside, the afternoon light had shifted colder. He walked Freya back to the truck. Before climbing in, he looked down at her. "Recognition," he murmured. Freya's tail gave a small, controlled movement, not wagging, acknowledging. As Logan started the engine, he glanced once more toward the road Calvin had taken. Not with anger, with assessment. The cabin had not been abandoned randomly, the cage had not been placed randomly, and Calvin Hargrove did not smile randomly. Logan pulled away from the store and drove slowly toward the north edge of town, where snowfields opened wide and the forest resumed its quiet watch. Freya lifted her head again, eyes on the horizon. The sky above Pine Hollow remained clear, too clear, as if waiting, The road north of Pine Hollow narrowed into packed snow and wind-hardened ice, the truck tires humming low beneath Logan's steady grip on the wheel. Freya sat upright in the passenger seat now, not curled on the floor. Her ears tracked the passing tree line, her posture alert but not tense. Since leaving town, she had been quieter than before, not fatigued but thoughtful in the way only animals could be, processing without words. Logan replayed the encounter at the store in silence. Calvin Hargrove had not denied anything. He had not confirmed anything either. Men like that survived by leaving just enough ambiguity to feel cooperative. Logan did not distrust him because Freya reacted. He distrusted him because Calvin had not asked a single question about the Everett's disappearance. Not even out of courtesy. That was the detail that lingered. Logan drove past the last plowed driveway and turned onto a narrow service trail he'd memorized from the forestry maps. It all looped behind the North Ridge and reconnected with an old logging corridor that had not been active in years. If someone had been watching the cabin from a distance, this was the angle they would have used. He parked beneath a stand of fir trees and stepped out. The air was colder here, untouched by town activity. The silence was deeper. Freya hopped down lightly and moved forward without waiting for instruction. She did not pull ahead recklessly. She navigated in arcs, scenting crosswinds, pausing occasionally to reorient. Logan followed at a measured pace. The logging corridor appeared ahead, a long, straight scar through the forest lined by tall timber like silent witnesses. Snow had drifted across it unevenly but not completely. There were signs of use, not frequent, but intentional. Logan crouched near a patch where snow had been disturbed and brushed it away. Beneath the surface lay compressed earth and faint tire impressions. Recent enough to matter. Freya moved past him and stopped near the edge of the corridor. She lowered her nose to the ground, then lifted it slightly, sampling air rather than snow. Logan watched the shift in her behavior. She wasn't tracking a wandering scent. She was distinguishing layers. He moved ahead slowly. A structure emerged at the far bend, partially obscured by trees. Not a house, not a shed, a small equipment shelter, built from corrugated metal and plywood, the kind used by logging crews to store chainsaws, fuel drums, and spare parts. Logan felt a tightening in his chest that had nothing to do with fear. It was recognition. He had seen places like this in other contexts, temporary hubs where work happened out of sight. Freya slowed. Her ears tipped forward, then flattened briefly before rising again. Logan raised a hand instinctively, signaling stillness, not that she needed it. He approached the structure from the side, boots quiet on packed snow. The door was closed. No lock visible. Logan circled it first. Behind the shelter, partially covered by a tarp, stood a stack of empty fuel containers, too many for personal firewood cutting. Logan returned to the front. He pulled the door open slowly. Inside, the air smelled faintly of oil and cold metal. Shelves lined the walls. Some tools hung in neat rows. Too neat. This was not an abandoned shack. It was maintained. Freya stepped in behind him. Her posture changed subtly. Not aggressive, not fearful, focused. She walked directly to a workbench against the far wall and paused. Logan followed. On the bench sat a ledger book, closed, no dust on its cover. He opened it. Pages filled with dates and notations, coordinates, parcel numbers, short-coded entries beside each. Logan scanned quickly. Some entries were crossed out, others circled. He recognized one of the parcel numbers, the Everett property. He felt his jaw tighten. Footsteps sounded behind him. Logan turned instantly. A man stood framed in the doorway, mid-40s, broad-shouldered but soft around the edges. Red beard trimmed unevenly as if he cut it himself without caring much how it looked. His cheeks were wind-burned and his eyes were light gray, restless but not cruel. He wore a heavy flannel under a work jacket, gloves tucked into his belt. He raised his hands slightly, palms out. "Easy," the man said. "I didn't know anyone was out here." His voice was rough but not confrontational. Logan stepped slightly to the side, putting himself between the man and Freya without making it obvious. "Who are you?" Logan asked. "Eli Dawson," the man replied. "I do maintenance work for whoever needs it. Logging, repairs, that kind of thing." His gaze dropped briefly to the ledger in Logan's hand, then to Freya. Recognition flickered. "That dog," Eli said softly. "She belonged to Harold." Freya did not move. She watched him. Her body did not stiffen. That was the detail Logan noticed. "You knew the Everetts?" Logan asked. Eli nodded. "Everyone did. Harold fixed my truck twice when I couldn't afford the shop." His jaw tightened. "They were good people." "Where are they?" Logan asked. Eli hesitated. His fingers flexed slightly at his sides. "I don't know," he said. It was almost convincing. Almost. Freya took one step toward him. Not hostile. Just closer. Eli's breathing shifted. Not fear, guilt. Freya stopped directly in front of Eli and did something unexpected. She sat. Not in submission. Not in challenge. She sat and held his gaze, unblinking, unmoving. The silence stretched. Logan watched the man's expression change, not outwardly dramatic, but internally unsettled. Eli swallowed. "She used to do that," he said quietly, "when Harold would lie to Lillian about taking on more work than he should." Logan didn't speak. Freya didn't move. Eli exhaled slowly. "I told them not to push back," he admitted. "I said take the money, move south, it's just land." Logan's eyes sharpened. "Push back against who?" Eli's jaw worked. He looked toward the ledger, then toward the door. "Against people who don't like hearing no." Freya's gaze did not soften. Eli's shoulders sagged slightly. "I don't know where they are," he repeated, "but I know they didn't leave by choice." The air inside the shelter felt heavier. Logan closed the ledger gently. "You work for Hargrove?" he asked. Eli shook his head quickly. "No, not directly." The qualifier hung there. "Who signs your checks?" Logan pressed. Eli hesitated again. "A company out of state," he said. "They've been buying parcels around here for months." "Why?" "Development," Eli replied. "Or so they say." Freya finally broke eye contact and stepped back to Logan's side. Not relaxed, but resolved. Logan studied Eli, carefully. The man wasn't polished enough to be a mastermind. He was the kind who accepted tasks and tried not to ask why. "Why are you here today?" Logan asked. Eli gestured vaguely at the shelves. "Inventory, fuel tracking." Logan glanced at the ledger again. It wasn't inventory, it was mapping. He closed it fully. "You ever see Harold argue with Hargrove?" Logan asked. Eli's lips pressed thin. "Once," he admitted. "Harold told him land isn't something you take from people who buried their children in it." The words landed harder than the cold. Logan's expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. "After that?" Logan asked. "After that," Eli said quietly, "Hargrove stopped coming himself." The statement carried more weight than Eli seemed to realize. Logan stepped toward the doorway. Freya followed. He paused just outside. "Eli," he said without turning, "if someone asked you to forget something, would you?" Eli didn't answer immediately. "No," he said finally, "not anymore." Logan nodded once. That was enough for now. He and Freya moved back toward the tree line. Behind them, the shelter door creaked softly as Eli closed it. The forest swallowed the corridor again. Freya walked close to Logan's left side, steady despite her slight limp. Logan's mind replayed each detail. The ledger, the crossed-out parcel, Harold's refusal, Hargrove stepping back. He did not feel anger. He felt direction. The Everetts had documented. They had resisted, and someone had shifted strategy. As they reached the truck, Logan paused and looked back once more at the logging corridor. Freya followed his gaze. The snow remained undisturbed, but the story was not. Logan opened the truck door. Freya climbed in without hesitation. He started the engine and pulled away slowly, the tires carving fresh lines over old ones. He did not know where the Everetts were, but he knew this. Someone had underestimated a man who kept records, and someone had forgotten that a dog remembers what people try to erase. The forest receded in the rearview mirror, not silent, not empty, waiting. By the time Logan steered the truck back into Pine Hollow, the light had turned from white to silver. Afternoon leaned toward evening, and the town seemed to fold inward as if bracing for another cold night. Freya sat upright beside him, watching the road with that same quiet vigilance she carried like a second spine. Logan didn't return to the general store. Instead, he parked near a small brick building at the corner of Main Street, a diner with a faded red sign that read, Hollow Hearth. Warm light spilled through fogged windows. He stepped inside with Freya at his side. Conversations dimmed, not out of fear but curiosity. Pine Hollow was small enough that new faces echoed. Behind the counter stood a woman in her late 30s with dark auburn hair tied into a low ponytail. Her name tag read Renee Caldwell. She was medium height, sturdy without being heavy. Her skin lightly freckled and flushed from years working near stoves and cold doorways. Her eyes were green and assessing, not suspicious but not naive. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and looked at Logan. "You're the one who found the dog," she said without greeting. Logan gave a slight nod. Renee's gaze softened for a fraction of a second when it shifted to Freya. "That's Lillian's girl," she said quietly. Freya stood still, not tense, not eager, present. Renee stepped from behind the counter and crouched a few feet away, not close enough to invade space, but near enough to be seen. "I used to sneak her bacon when Lillian wasn't looking," she said, half smiling. Freya's ears twitched at the tone more than the words. "She won't take food from strangers," Logan said. Renee nodded. "She didn't when Harold trained her, but she would take it from me." There was something personal in that statement. Logan studied her carefully. "You knew them well," he said. Renee stood again, wiping her hands. "I rented the room upstairs for years when I first came to town. Lillian helped me open this place. Harold fixed the wiring after my ex-husband nearly burned it down, trying to install a new oven." Her jaw tightened slightly at the mention. "He liked to drink," she added flatly. "Harold didn't." The air in the diner shifted with shared understanding. Renee glanced toward the stairs in the back corner. "You want to see something?" she asked. Logan didn't answer verbally. He followed. The room above the diner was small but clean. One bed, one dresser, a narrow window overlooking the main street. The space smelled faintly of old cedar and laundry soap. Renee walked to the dresser and opened the top drawer. Inside lay a stack of envelopes bound with twine. "These came 3 weeks before they stopped coming into town," she said. Logan took one carefully. The envelope was official-looking, corporate letterhead, out-of-state address. He unfolded the letter. An offer, not a polite inquiry. A timeline, a clause that suggested urgency. Freya moved toward the window and sat, watching the street below. Renee leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "They were scared," she said quietly, but not of losing the land. Of what? Logan asked. Renee hesitated. Of being erased. The word lingered. Logan felt it settle. Did they report anything? He asked. Renee shook her head. They didn't trust the process. Harold used to say paperwork protects people who already have protection. Logan folded the letter back into place. Why keep these here? He asked. Renee met his gaze. Because I don't trust the mail to stay unopened in this town anymore. Silence stretched between them. Freya's posture shifted, her ears angled backward, not toward the street, toward the hallway. Logan turned. The stairwell behind them remained empty, but the wood floor gave the faintest whisper of pressure. Not footsteps, just weight, adjusting. Logan moved slowly toward the doorway. The hall was clear. He stepped to the stair rail and looked down. The diner below carried on as usual. Forks clinking, low conversation. No one looking up. He returned to the room. Freya remained at the window now, her gaze fixed across the street. Logan followed her line of sight. Parked near the curb was a dark sedan he hadn't seen before. Not from town, too clean, too unmarked. As Logan watched, the driver's side window of the sedan lowered slightly, just enough to reflect the room's interior like a dull mirror. Freya did not growl, she did not bark, she stood perfectly still, her body aligned with the glass, as if she could see beyond it, beyond the reflection, beyond the tint. Logan felt something subtle but unmistakable. They weren't being followed, they were being measured. The window rose again, the sedan remained. Renee stepped closer to the window. Is that who I think it is? She whispered. Who do you think it is? Logan asked without taking his eyes off the car. Renee exhaled slowly. That's not a town car. Freya's tail gave a single controlled flick. Logan turned away first, not from fear, from refusal to perform. Do they know you kept these? He asked Renee. She shook her head. I don't think so. Keep it that way, he said. He gathered the letters back into the drawer exactly as he found them. No theatrics, no promises, just precision. They returned downstairs. The sedan was gone by the time Logan stepped outside. The street looked ordinary again, too ordinary. Freya walked close beside him toward the truck. As he opened the passenger door, a voice called from across the road. Pierce! Logan turned. A man stood near the hardware store entrance. He was tall, leaner than Calvin, older perhaps by a few years. His hair was iron gray at the temples, cut short but not military. A trimmed beard shadowed his jawline, not thick, but deliberate. His eyes were blue and sharp, not warm but not openly hostile either. He wore a tailored winter coat, gloves tucked neatly into one pocket. Agent Nolan Price, he said, stepping forward. Environmental Compliance Division. His badge flashed briefly, not theatrical, just efficient. Logan studied him. Price's posture was disciplined but not rigid. The kind of man who had once worked field operations before transferring to something cleaner. You're a long way from the state capitol, Logan said evenly. Price's mouth curved slightly. So are you. Freya stood between them, not blocking, just aware. Price glanced at her. She's the reason I'm here, he said. Logan didn't react. Price continued. We've been monitoring land transfers in this county. Patterns don't add up. And the Everetts? Logan asked. Price's expression shifted. Not surprise, but recognition. You found their dog, he said quietly. Yes. Price nodded once. I've requested documentation from Hargrove's firm. Delays, paperwork complications, the usual. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Be careful, he added. Logan met his gaze without blinking. I'm not careless. Price studied him a moment longer. No, he said. You're not. He handed Logan a small card. Call me if you find something that isn't in a file. Price turned and walked toward a government-issued SUV parked discreetly at the far end of the block. Freya watched him go. Logan slipped the card into his pocket. He didn't know whether Price was ally or obstacle, but he knew this. The Everett's land was no longer just local business. It was systemic. Logan climbed into the truck. Freya settled in, but her gaze remained on the empty stretch of road where the sedan had been. The sky above Pine Hollow darkened gradually. No storm this time, just evening, taking its place. Logan started the engine. The diner's lights glowed behind him. The town breathed softly in the cold, and somewhere within that stillness something had shifted. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough to suggest that someone else had noticed he was asking questions. He pulled away from the curb slowly. Freya turned her head forward, ready. The next morning came brittle and bright, as if the world had been reassembled overnight and polished for inspection. Logan did not return to the logging corridor. He did not revisit the diner. Instead, he drove beyond the edge of Pine Hollow toward the oldest structure in town, a small white church that sat on a slight rise overlooking a field of snow-covered headstones. Freya stood on the passenger seat as they approached. Front paws braced against the dashboard, eyes fixed ahead. The church was modest, wooden siding chipped at the corners, a bell tower that leaned just slightly as if bowing to the years. The cemetery behind it held no grand monuments, just simple stones worn smooth by winter after winter. Logan parked and stepped out. The air here felt different, not quieter, heavier. Freya moved ahead slowly, her gait steady despite the slight favor in her front leg. She did not head for the church doors, she walked past it. Toward the graves, Logan followed. He scanned the stones as he passed, family names repeated over decades. Then he saw it, a stone still too clean for its age. Harold Everett, 1944 to 2023. Below it, Lillian Everett, 1946 to 2023. Logan stopped. Freya stood in front of the stone, not touching it, not pawing, just standing. Her ears were neither forward nor back, neutral, present. Logan crouched slowly. There had been no obituary mentioned, no funeral discussed, yet here were dates, carved, recent. He brushed snow from the base of the stone. The soil at the edges was undisturbed, no fresh digging, no collapse. The ground was hard and frozen solid. He exhaled slowly. Behind him, the church door creaked open. A man stepped out, adjusting his coat collar against the wind. He was in his early 60s, tall and slender, with thinning white hair combed carefully back from a high forehead. His face was narrow, lined not from anger but from long years of listening to other people's sorrow. His eyes were soft blue, observant and gentle. He walked with the posture of someone accustomed to being leaned on. "Morning," he said quietly. Logan stood. "You the pastor?" he asked. The man nodded. "Reverend Thomas Green." His handshake was light but steady. He glanced at Freya. "That's their dog," he said almost to himself. "You knew them," Logan replied. Reverend Green nodded slowly. "I baptized their grandson 20 years ago," he said. "Buried their daughter 15 years ago." Logan's gaze sharpened. They had a daughter? Green's jaw tightened gently. "Lost her in a car accident. Only child." The wind moved softly through the cemetery grass, dry beneath the snow. Freya shifted slightly closer to Logan's leg. "Did you conduct their funeral?" Logan asked. Green hesitated. "No," he said carefully. "I didn't." Logan looked back at the stone. "They're buried here." The Reverend stepped forward, hands folded in front of him. "The stone was placed last week," he said. "Delivered. Paid for." "By who?" Green shook his head faintly. "The invoice didn't come through the church. It was arranged privately." Freya lowered her head and sniffed lightly at the base of the marker. Not frantic, deliberate. Logan studied the stone again. The carving was precise, too fast. "Have you seen them?" Logan asked. Green's eyes met his. "No." The word landed heavier than it should have. Freya suddenly moved away from the stone and walked several steps toward a small oak tree at the edge of the cemetery. She paused beside a wooden bench beneath it. Logan followed. Carved into the back of the bench, faded but visible, were initials. Logan ran his fingers over the carving. Old, not recent. The wood had weathered around the letters. Freya pressed her nose beneath the bench seat and inhaled deeply. Then she looked up at Logan. Not with grief, not with confusion, but with something steadier. Certainty. The grave marker behind them felt like a declaration. The bench felt like a memory, and memory didn't align with finality. Logan stood slowly. "They're not here," he said quietly. Green approached carefully. "I believe that," he said. Logan looked at him sharply. "You believe it?" Green nodded. "I've buried many people," he said. "The Everetts did not feel finished." The statement was not mystical, it was observational. "Why didn't you question the marker?" Logan asked. Green smiled faintly. "In a town this small, questioning publicly can cost more than silence." Freya walked back toward the stone once more, then stopped halfway. She did not sit. She did not lie down. She waited. Logan turned back to Green. "Who benefits from this?" he asked. Green's expression tightened. "Land ownership transfers quickly after death," he said quietly, "especially when no immediate family contests it. And if there is family?" "The grandson lives in Montana," Green replied. "Works oil fields. Hasn't visited in years." Logan felt the threads align. A forged narrative. A marker to establish death. Paperwork to establish transfer. "And if someone contested the marker?" Logan asked. Green's eyes moved briefly toward the church. "They would need proof," he said. Logan nodded once. "Proof." Freya turned toward the church doors, not urgently, intentionally, and Logan followed her. Inside, the church smelled faintly of wax and old hymnals. Sunlight filtered through narrow stained glass panels, casting muted colors across wooden pews. Freya moved down the aisle and stopped near the front. Logan scanned the space, nothing unusual. Until he noticed something on the table near the pulpit. A folded program. He picked it up. A memorial service notice. Names printed. Harold and Lillian Everett. Date listed 3 days from now. Logan's eyes narrowed. The service hadn't happened. It was scheduled. Green stepped beside him. "It was requested anonymously," he said. "No body present, just a remembrance." Logan folded the paper carefully. "They're closing the narrative before anyone asks questions," he said quietly. Green's gaze drifted toward the door. "Yes." Freya stood in the center aisle, ears angled toward the entrance. Logan turned. Through the frosted glass of the church door, he saw the faint silhouette of a vehicle parked near the cemetery entrance. Not close, not aggressive, watching. He did not step outside, not yet. He looked down at Freya. Her breathing was steady. Her eyes were clear, not fearful, ready. Logan slipped the memorial notice into his pocket. He looked at Green. "If someone wanted to delay this service," he said calmly, "could they?" Green considered the question. "Yes," he said, "if there were legitimate cause." Logan nodded. "There will be." He walked toward the door, pausing only long enough to let Freya step ahead of him. Outside, the vehicle at the cemetery entrance pulled away slowly. No urgency, just acknowledgement. Logan watched it disappear beyond the hill. He did not chase. He did not rush. He looked back at the stone once more. Harold Everett, Lillian Everett, names carved in certainty. Freya stood beside him, steady. Logan's voice was quiet but firm. You don't carve the end of someone's story unless you're afraid of what happens next. The wind passed gently across the cemetery. The church bell did not ring, but something had shifted. The narrative had been written, and now it would be tested. Logan walked back toward the truck. Freya followed without hesitation. The church remained behind them, white against the blue sky. The gravestones did not move, but the truth beneath them. It had not been buried. Snow began falling again that evening. Not in a storm, not in fury, but in slow, deliberate flakes that made the world quieter without warning at first. Logan did not return to the training outpost. Instead, he parked behind Pine Hollow's municipal building, a square brick structure with a single dim light above its rear entrance. The town office closed at 5, but small towns rarely slept fully. There were always lights left on somewhere. Freya stepped down from the truck with controlled ease, her black and tan coat catching stray flakes that melted against her warmth. She shook once, not from cold but from adjustment, and stayed close at Logan's left. The rear door was unlocked. Not unusual in a town like this. Inside, the hallway smelled of old paper and heating vents working too hard. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. Logan walked past framed photographs of former mayors and town celebrations frozen in time. Parades, harvest festivals, high school footballs, teams. At the end of the hall, a door stood slightly ajar. Inside, a desk lamp glowed. A woman sat behind it. She was in her early 40s, medium height, dark brown hair pinned into a practical bun. Her posture was upright but tired, the kind that came from years of sitting straight in meetings where no one wanted to hear what you were saying. Her skin was olive-toned, her expression steady but guarded. She looked up as Logan entered. "You're either lost," she said calmly, "or you know something." Her nameplate read Clara Vance, county clerk. Logan closed the door gently behind him. "I'm looking for a land transfer," he said. Clara studied him. Her gaze moved to Freya, who stood near the door without wandering. "The Everett parcel," Logan added. Clara's fingers stilled on her keyboard. "That file was processed last week," she said carefully. "Under what condition?" Logan asked. Clara leaned back slightly in her chair. "You're not family," she said. "No." "You law enforcement?" "No." "Then why are you here?" Logan didn't answer immediately. He let silence do part of the work. Freya shifted slightly, ears tilting toward Clara. The clerk exhaled slowly. "Death certificate," she said at last. "That's the condition." Logan's jaw tightened. "Signed by," Clara hesitated, "a physician listed out of county." Logan stepped closer to the desk. "Was there a body?" Clara met his gaze directly. "No." Freya's posture stiffened, not sharply, just enough to register. Clara continued quietly. "In cases where remains are unrecovered, documentation can still be issued under certain circumstances." "Under what circumstances?" Logan asked. Clara's eyes flicked toward the hallway. "Natural disaster," she said. "Extreme weather events." Logan absorbed that. The storm, the timing, the memorial notice. Clara opened a drawer and pulled out a thin file folder. "I shouldn't show you this," she said evenly. But the paperwork doesn't align." She slid the folder across the desk. Logan opened it. Inside were printed forms, notarized statements, and a preliminary transfer agreement already drafted for corporate acquisition. The timeline was tight, too tight. Freya stepped forward and placed her nose lightly against the edge of the desk, not sniffing randomly, pausing. Logan followed her line of sight. There was a second folder beneath the first, thicker. Clara's hand hovered over it. "That's the one that didn't get filed," she said quietly. "Why not?" Logan asked. Clara hesitated. "Because it disappeared before submission." Logan waited. "It reappeared this morning," she added. The air in the room shifted. "What's in it?" Logan asked. Clara opened the second folder slowly. Inside were photographs, not the ones Harold had taken. These were newer, taken at night. Long lens shots of the Everett cabin, of the logging corridor, of the church. Logan's face remained unreadable. Clara watched him carefully. "This wasn't meant for county record," she said. "It was meant for leverage." Freya lowered her head slightly, eyes fixed on one photograph in particular. It showed the Everetts standing outside their cabin weeks ago. Alive, clear, recent. The timestamp visible in the corner. 2 weeks after the official date of death listed on the certificate. Freya stepped closer and pressed her nose directly against the image of Lillian Everett. Then she did something Logan hadn't seen before. She exhaled slowly onto the glossy paper and placed her paw lightly beside the timestamp. Not scratching, not pawing, pointing. Clara inhaled sharply. "That date," she whispered. Logan nodded once. The room felt smaller, not because of danger, because of confirmation. The Everetts were alive after their recorded deaths. The certificate was preemptive, constructed. Clara's fingers trembled slightly as she flipped through the pages. "These weren't meant to be here," she said. "Who delivered them?" Logan asked. Clara swallowed. "A courier. No name, just instructions." "From?" Clara hesitated again. "The firm that's acquiring the land." Logan closed the folder carefully. "They needed the deaths processed before the transfer," he said quietly. Clara nodded. "And someone miscalculated the dates." Freya stepped back to Logan's side. Clara leaned forward slightly. "You understand what this means?" she asked. "Yes. That someone intended to remove them from the record." Logan met her gaze. "And replace them with paperwork." Clara closed the folders and slid them back into the drawer. "If this becomes public without proof," she said carefully, "the town fractures." Logan considered that. Pine Hollow was not built for scandals. It was built for endurance. "Is there a copy?" he asked. Clara gave a small, humorless smile. "I make copies of everything." She reached beneath her desk and retrieved a sealed envelope. She handed it to Logan. "This never passed through official channels," she said, "which means it never officially existed." Logan took the envelope. Freya watched Clara closely, not with suspicion, but with assessment. "You're taking a risk," Logan said. Clara nodded once. "I've lived here my entire life," she replied. "I watched Harold build that porch plank by plank. I'm not erasing him with a form." Silence settled between them. Snow tapped softly against the window. Logan slipped the envelope into his jacket. "If anyone asks," Clara said quietly, "you were never here." Logan inclined his head slightly. Freya turned toward the door. As they stepped back into the hallway, the fluorescent lights flickered once, not dramatically, just enough to remind him that infrastructure, like truth, could falter if neglected. Outside, snow layered gently over the town. The truck's engine turned over on the first try. Logan sat still for a moment before pulling away. Freya settled beside him, her breathing steady. He did not feel triumph. He felt alignment. The Everetts had not vanished into the weather. They had been scheduled, processed, declared, and somewhere within that machinery a mistake had slipped through. Logan drove past the church without stopping. Past the diner, past the general store, the town looked unchanged. But paper had shifted, and paper in the right hands could rewrite narratives. Freya lifted her head once more and looked toward the north ridge. Logan followed her gaze briefly. Then he returned his eyes to the road. The storm outside had been weather, the storm inside Pine Hollow. That was design, and design could be dismantled, one document at a time. At its heart, this story was never just about missing people, forged documents, or land transfers. It was about discernment. It was about recognizing when something feels wrong, even when the paperwork says it is right. It was about a man who chose not to look away, and a dog whose quiet loyalty became a living testimony that truth cannot be buried by signatures or stone markers. Sometimes we expect miracles to look dramatic. We imagine thunder, voices, or impossible rescues. But more often, God works through small interruptions, a detail that doesn't align, a date that doesn't make sense, a loyal companion who refuses to move, a conscience that won't let you rest. The miracle in this story was not loud. It was steady. It was the courage to question, the wisdom to observe, the faith to trust what you feel in your spirit when something isn't right. In our daily lives, we may not uncover falsified records or hidden agendas, but we do face moments when it would be easier to stay silent, easier to accept what is presented, easier to believe that one person cannot make a difference. This story reminds us that one person paying attention can change everything. One act of integrity can disrupt a carefully built lie. One faithful step can protect what others tried to erase. God often places us exactly where we are needed, not because we are perfect, but because we are willing. If this story spoke to you, share it with someone who may need encouragement today. Leave a comment and tell us what part touched your heart. Do you believe God sends signs in quiet ways? We would love to hear your thoughts. Subscribe to the channel so we can continue sharing stories that strengthen faith, defend truth, and remind us that justice still matters. May God bless you and your family. May He guard your home, guide your decisions, and give you discernment when something feels wrong. And may He grant you the courage to stand firm when it matters most.